Hey guys, it's Jessica. Welcome back to my channel. Today is an exciting day because we are going to find out together which book that I read in March was the best one. Okay, so since it is March and I don't follow sports particularly at all, I decided that it would be a really good idea to create a bracket for the books that I read this month. So I actually have done that. And at the end of the video, if you stick around, we're gonna fill out the bracket and we are gonna figure out what the best books were that I read in the month. I have it back here, but it's very large. It doesn't really fit in front of me if I put it in front of me. So we'll look at that together at the end of the video. But right now, we are just going to go through all the books that I read in the month. And we're going to start out with some statistics. I read 12 books in the month, which is 2 more books than I had on my TBR. I did complete my TBR, and then I also added 2 new releases that I got from the library that I really wanted to read right away. So with those 12 books, I had 1 DNF that I finished at over 50% I read of that, so I'm going to count it as a book that I read. So looking at some stats from my story graph, I can see that I read more science fiction than anything else. My second highest category was fantasy and then literary fiction. My average rating was a 3.84, and I read 4,053 pages in the month of March. So it was a really great reading month for me. I have been in a little bit, I don't like to say reading slump, but in a little bit of a reading slump for the past 2 months, and I'm happy to say that I'm feeling much better about my reading, and I got multiple 5-star reads this month, so stick around and you're gonna find out what they were. I'm also going to start doing a rating system for my books so that you can see what I rated the individual elements of each book, and I'm gonna have a graphic that I'm gonna put up on the screen here for each book. And this is very inspired, I would say, by Maddie from Kris&Mads. Go check out their channel. I will link them down below if you've never been there. It has all of Maddie's and then one other one that I wanted to add in there. So there are 7 things that I'm going to be rating these books on. And those things are plot, setting, characters, emotional impact, themes, prose, and personal enjoyment. So I'm going to average all those together. I'm going to get a number. And then I'm probably going to go with that number for my rating unless I just feel in my heart that it was a 5-star read, and then it's just going to be 5 stars. So let's go ahead and get started with the first book that I read in the month. So the first book I read in March was one that I have been extremely excited to read. I have seen several booktubers who I really love who have said that this was a fantastic dystopian sci-fi, very literary. And I love the cover, I'm obsessed. So I was really excited to get to read it this month. So it was the first one I picked up, and it is I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger. And I'm gonna do my best with this cover that is from the library. I'm gonna buy this one. I've already decided because it's so beautiful and I need it on my shelves. I Cheerfully Refuse is set in a future American upper Midwest where things have not gone great for our country, shall we say. It does appear that we are in a world where the world is controlled by the rich, by the oligarchs, and people who cannot afford for even basic services such as, the fire department cannot have those things. We're also dealing with really bad climate change. This in particular takes place on the Great Lakes, and we see a lot of the effects of climate change. For instance, you see that the shores of the lakes have been receding and revealing things that have been kept on the bottom of the lake for hundreds and hundreds of years. Our main character is Rainy. Rainy is a musician. He is a big bearded teddy bear of a man is how I would describe him. He loves his wife very much, and they live a somewhat insulated life, I would say, in a small town near the lake. His wife owns a bookstore. In this world, people have very much stopped reading. Reading is not encouraged. Not everyone knows how to read. So it's a little bit anachronistic for her to own this bookshop. But this book is also very much about the power of literature and books and how removing those from our society, the bad things that would happen if we no longer had that knowledge. So the setup of the book, it's not a spoiler because it is in the description of the book. Something happens to Rainy's wife, and he sets off on a journey, which is described as a very Orphean journey. He sets out in a boat on the lake. And most of the story is about him traveling to different places around the lake, meeting different people, seeing different parts of the world. He, at one point, ends up connecting with a very young girl who ends up traveling with him, and their relationship becomes very central to the story. But it's very much a discovery of what it means to keep living when so many things that you care about have been taken away from you. And I found it very, very appropriate for our current times. I found it to be very moving. I loved Rainy. I thought that Rainy was just a character you just don't see very much. He's just such a sensitive guy who loved his wife so much, and now that she is gone, he does not know what to do without her in his life. So this was a fantastic book, and I would recommend it to people who enjoy a dystopian tale, but it is very much literary fiction. The language is beautiful. I would not go into this thinking, that you're going to be getting the Hunger Games. This is a small story. It's a slow story. It's not going anywhere in a hurry, but I thought that it was absolutely gorgeous, and I think more people need to be reading it. So let me give you my ratings for this book really quick. So I gave the plot a 3-star because that's not really what the book was about. The setting was a 5-star, fantastic world building, characters 4, emotional impact 5, themes 5, prose 5. Prose was beautiful. My personal enjoyment, it was a 5. So when you average all that out, I'm not going to go through this for every single book. When you average all that out, it does end up at about a 5-star for me. So this is going to be my first 5-star read of the month. Absolutely loved it. Would definitely recommend it. If you are interested at all, give it a try and see what you think, because I think you will have such an emotional and moving time. Since I was planning to do a bracket system, I really wanted to have my books go in random order. And I know I could have done that at the end, but I kind of wanted to choose them in random order. So I actually used a spinner wheel. The next book that it chose for me was When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. This is a really hard book to describe. Well, it's not hard to describe. It's more that when I describe it to people, I think it sounds really ridiculous. So the setup of this book is that the world wakes up one morning and finds that the moon has turned into cheese. A cheese with the same mass as the original moon, which means that it's now larger and therefore closer to Earth, but cheese nonetheless, and it's very bright yellow, and that is indeed a ridiculous setup. In the first chapter of the book, we visit a museum that has a piece of moon rock in its collection somewhere in Ohio. This is probably based on a true place because I know John Scalzi is from Ohio, as am I. And lo and behold, their piece of moon rock has also turned to cheese. A lot of discussion about what kind of cheese it might be. Nobody knows. It's a very absurdist premise, I would say. And I requested the ARC because I trust John Scalzi on some level to always write a book that is going to keep me entertained, and that is exactly what he did here. It's a strange book in a lot of ways, and I would not say it's a perfect book, but I enjoyed it, and I think if you're looking for something fun to distract yourself at this time, I think it's not a bad choice. So when you start the book, you may think, okay, I'm going to be following these characters in the museum because that's the first chapter. But the truth is that every single chapter of this book follows a different character. And I think that's important to know going into it, because I was not expecting it to be, 30 POVs or whatever that ended up being. I kept thinking, well, we're going to circle back around to somebody. And there are characters who recur, but the POVs themselves do not recur. So you are very much in a different person's head in every single chapter, seeing a different part of the world, a different way that people react to this reality where the moon has turned into cheese. It's not totally comedic. There are obviously going to be serious repercussions to the fact that the moon has turned into cheese. There are a lot of characters, particularly I would say political characters, who may or may not be inspired by real life American political figures. I would say yes. And I did find that enjoyable as well. I just thought it was fun. I thought it was fun. It did not change my life. I knew going in this was probably not going to be a 5-star book for me, but I had a good time. So I'm going to put my rating system up over here for this book, and you can see that I enjoyed the plot because it's absurd and ridiculous, and I just thought it was enjoyable. It moved along. Different things happened. It was kind of exciting. Enjoyed that. I don't think that John Scalzi's strength is his characters. I feel that his characters tend to frequently have a character voice that feels very similar. And in a book like this, which has so many different POV characters, that is extremely obvious. So I set that as a 3. I thought the prose, though, was a 4 because I feel like his writing is engaging and breezy and snappy, and I always have a good time. I enjoy it. So my rating for this is going to be probably about a 3.75, and I would recommend it if you're looking for something fun or different. It would not be the book of his that I would start with. So he considers this book and his last 2 books to be part of a trilogy in terms of their tone, not so much in terms of them having characters that repeat. And that would be the Kaiju Preservation Society and Starter Villain. Of those 2, I liked Starter Villain better because it's about cats. But I don't know if that's popular. I think more people liked Kaiju Preservation Society, so that's probably where I would recommend that you start if you're looking to get into this kind of John Scalzi novel. But I think this was solid. I had a good time. I can't complain. The next book that my spinner wheel selected for me to read was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This is the first book in a duology, and I do own the other book, so I am going to be getting to that at some point because I did have a pretty good time with this book. I do have some kind of quibbles with it, I feel like, but let me tell you what it's about. This is the story of a young woman named April May. April May is a recent college graduate. She is a design student who has found real life in her field to be slightly disillusioning, I feel, as so many young people do. And she's coming home from working late at the office one night, and she finds a mysterious metal transformer-like statue, yes, the cartoon, sitting on the sidewalk where it was not before. And so she cannot believe this is happening. Where did this come from? Is it a crazy art project? What is it? So she calls her friend, and her friend comes out and they make a YouTube video about the discovery of this statue, and it goes viral because it turns out that this is not the only statue which they have named Carl, but that there are Carls all over the world that have mysteriously appeared at the exact same time, and nobody knows why. Are they alien? Is it some kind of crazy worldwide art installation? At the beginning of the book, nobody really knows. We do learn a lot more about what's going on with the Carls later. This is definitely a science fiction story, which I was not really sure of going into it. Definitely, I would say science fiction. So let's talk about what I liked and what I didn't like in this book. I thought the plot was great. I enjoyed the story of the Carls and the world kind of going crazy over the Carls. But the thing I didn't like about this book as much was that it felt very much like a commentary on our influencer society, because April May becomes extremely famous extremely quickly for having been the first person to discover a Carl and making this video. And a lot of the book is about her navigating that fame and being an influencer. And this is all, I am quite certain, stuff that Hank Green is super familiar with. So I can understand it being in there, but I will say that April herself is a pretty unlikable character, just to me in general. I did not care for April. She was really good at not being nice to people who cared about her. So that's kind of a downside for me. Not that I think she was poorly written, but that she was very difficult for me to root for. But overall, I did have a good time, and the ending of the book really brought it back. It does end on a little bit of a cliffhanger, which is good to know if you're somebody that really hates that and you're going to need to have the second book lined up to read it right away. It obviously didn't bother me enough to immediately read the second book. So you're going to see, I'm going to put my ratings up here, and you'll see that I felt that the plot of this book was very strong, and also that it had a pretty good emotional impact on me. And the themes I thought were great. The themes particularly about the internet and the way that we elevate people on the internet to fame that perhaps they do not know how to deal with, and how unreasonable that can be. I thought that all of those themes were extremely well done, and I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. My ultimate rating is going to come out to a 4-star. The next book that I read was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This is the story of a reform school for boys based on a real reform school for boys in the American South in the 1950s. And the story of what happens to several boys that are sent there for reasons that are extremely unfair. I would say, and about the mistreatment that they experience while they are there. It's based on a real story of this school where many, many years later, decades later, they found a secret cemetery and found all of these boys who had essentially been murdered, and their deaths had not been recorded. They'd just been disappeared on the grounds, and the scandal that came along with that. This is actually the second book that I've read that is based on this topic. The first one was The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. And I actually, if I'm recommending one of the books, like one of those two books, I'm actually going to recommend The Reformatory. And the reason for that is because I found it to be more emotionally affecting. I had a harder time connecting to some of the characters within this work, and it is also very short. And maybe it's just because I read it second. I don't know. I still think this is a really, really great book. I absolutely see why it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I would definitely recommend reading it. You're going to be horrified. It does a little bit of time hopping, so there is a kind of present day, which in the book is when they have discovered the cemetery plot line going on, along with the story of back when the school was open. And so that actually didn't work for me quite as well. I didn't enjoy that. It was jarring. And there were times that I wasn't sure where we were, like which time period we were in. But again, I did enjoy this book, just not as much as the other book that I've read on the subject. And if you're only going to read one, I would recommend The Reformatory. Yes, it is classified as horror, but it's honestly not very scary because it's one of those books where the people are going to be the real monsters. So I'm going to put up my ratings over here, and you're going to see that my rating that I ended up with was a 4-star. And I think it's a really good book and you should check it out. And then after Nickel Boys, I read Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reid. This is another library cover, so I'm going to do my best here. I really enjoy Ava Reid sometimes. A Study in Drowning is a 5-star read for me, and I love it. It's one of my favorite books. This one did not really do the same thing for me. I requested it from NetGalley, and so I had to read it as an ARC. And then I got the real copy to look through and see if there was anything different, which I don't really think there is. And she describes it at the beginning of the book as being very much her tribute to the 2010s and all of the dystopian tournament series that we had then. It's very Hunger Games inspired, like extremely Hunger Games inspired. I've seen it described as a sapphic Hunger Games, which I think that's an okay description for the book because the source material is so very, very obvious, I think, within it. We are following the story of Inessa. Inessa is a teenage girl. She lives with her brother and her mother in this kind of flooded, moldy, poverty-stricken small town in a future world where climate change has not had great things, had great effects, right? And one thing about this is that we have corporations within this world who actually will allow you to go into huge amounts of debt, but only up to a certain point. And when you get up to that certain point, either you or someone that you nominate has to go into what's called the gauntlet, I think, to fight against kind of a cybernetically altered human to try to win this gladiator style competition so that the debt can be wiped out. And everyone watches it on TV. So in a lot of ways, it's very Hunger Games. There's also a city that is, you know, up above the flooding and very glittering and very strange. And, you know, people do alterations and all things that are very, very Hunger Games. The character, the kind of cybernetic character who is going after Inessa in this competition, her name is Mel, and she is the love interest of Inessa. They do fall in love. But the problem was, I was having a good time for like the first part, maybe like the first 25%, because it is nostalgic if you lived, you know, that time period and you read all those books. But then when we got past that, I started just wishing that I was rereading The Hunger Games. And that's because thematically, it does not hit in the same way. It feels so derivative of The Hunger Games that I think I could not get over it. I just could not get over it. And ultimately, this book is just not a winner for me. There's nothing wrong with it. I also didn't think her prose was as beautiful as it is in some of her writing. So I was disappointed. So here's my ratings for this one. I ended up at about a 2.5 for my star rating. I don't think it was terrible, but I really don't think it needed to exist. And I'm going to stick with that. And now we have my final arc of the month, and all of these books are now released as I'm filming this video. So this one is The Keeper of Lonely Spirits by E.M. Anderson. Our main character here is Peter Shaughnessy. Peter was cursed by an Irish ghost spirit. I don't know. We're not interested in knowing about that. He's been cursed and he can't die. But the thing he can do is he can see spirits and he can help them to go to their eternal reward, to the afterlife, to the wherever it is they go. The book doesn't explain it and Peter doesn't know either. So it's very much kind of like if you watch The Ghost Whisperer. It's not like that, but that part is a little bit like that. And I personally love that show. So I was already all in for that aspect. But Peter has, for a very long time, for maybe the past 200 years, kept himself totally isolated from people. He will not allow himself to care. He takes a job as a cemetery caretaker at a small town in the South and finds that he is having a much more difficult time keeping himself separate from the people who live and work in this small town and in this cemetery. In particular, he develops a very, very, very slow burn romance with the curator of the local history museum. He gets involved with a local family and their children. He helps out the manager of the cemetery with some of her personal life and her personal problems and maybe some ghosts that are hanging around bothering her. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. It's very heartwarming. And I also really loved that, first of all, the romance was very slow burn, and that the romance is actually between people who are in their 70s. So Peter aged basically until he was about 70 and then aged no more. And same with the love interest. He's also about that age. And I enjoyed that. And the themes of this book really, there is a mystery. There's a ghost haunting the cemetery. We got to solve that. But the themes are really about whether it is worth it to love things, even knowing that they will die and that there will be pain and that that is unavoidable for us as humans. And is connection with other people worth that future pain? That's really Peter's journey and the story of the book. And this book hit so hard for me. I cried like a baby multiple times. It's cozy. It's probably, I would say, a cozy horror story, but it's not very horrible. So really, it's not a fantasy though. I wouldn't say it's a fantasy exactly. I don't know what to call it, but it is cozy. And cozies are difficult for me. I don't always love a cozy story, but this one was exactly what I wanted because the emotions that it's trying to evoke feel very real. It doesn't feel like it's trying to play on my heartstrings, get me to feel things. It doesn't feel surface level and cute and cozy for that. It feels real, but also so comforting. I just absolutely adored it. So my rating for this is, if you can't tell from how excited I was, then my rating for this is going to be 5 stars. I loved everything about it, and I haven't seen literally any hype for this book. So if you're watching this and you like cozy books, I need you to go put a hold on this at the library right now. Okay, and now we have one of the books that I actually added, and that's because the library offered me a copy of The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Chronicles of Castellane series. I gave the first book 5 stars, and I'm going to let y'all know right now that I gave this book 5 stars also. It is the second book in a series, so I don't know how much I can say about it. I can say that we are in a kingdom called Castellane that has a king who has some mysterious things going on with him. And we have his son, the prince, and we have the prince's sword catcher, who is really kind of our main character. And a sword catcher is someone whose job it is to impersonate the prince at times that it might be dangerous for him to appear, to basically be willing to give his life for the prince. And the character in this case, his name is Kel, and he's so close to Prince Connor. They are best friends in spite of, this strange relationship they have. So they are 2 of the main characters. And then we also have a doctor, a female doctor who is a member of an oppressed minority within this society. And her story has consistently been my favorite one throughout both books, and that was true for this one as well. Will you enjoy this book? I would say if you like Cassandra Clare's writing, you're gonna like this book. If you read, all of her 900 books, I didn't read all of them, but I do like her writing. You're definitely gonna like this because it's the same thing. It's just for an adult audience and not for a young adult audience. If you're someone who perhaps has read a lot of young adult fantasy, or you've read a lot of romantasy and you would like to transition to reading some more adult fantasies, or straight fantasies, I think this would be a good transition series for you to start with. It is sometimes classified as a romantasy, but personally, having read a lot of romantasies, the romance is not the point of this book, and the first book barely has any romance in it, so I don't get that at all. But I have seen some people trying to call this a romantasy, and I really don't think it is. I think it's just a fantasy that has some romances in it. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. It's a kind of a lighter fantasy. I wouldn't say that you should go into it looking for, Tolkien or anything like that, but I had a great time, and it's gonna stay 5 stars, just like the other one. Okay, and next we have the book that I read for my final book for the Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge this year. I do have a video about that. I will link it down below. And this is Barrayar by Lois McMaster Bujold. I have it in a bind up, and I'm gonna show you this fantastic cover up close again because, the 90s, fun times. This was for the prompt, read a book that was written in the 90s. This is the second book that I've read. So I've read both of the books in this bind up. The first one was Shards of Honor, and the second one was Barrayar, which I read for this. And I have had a hard time deciding how I'm going to review this book, because I know that this series is very, very beloved by a lot of people. And I don't like putting things down that a lot of people really love, but I have not had a good time with either one of these books. I actually like the first one a little better. In this book, we follow Cordelia, our main character, again, and she has gotten married to Vorkosigan, Lord Vorkosigan, and they are living on the planet Barrayar. And she is pregnant with his child, and there's a lot of politics and kind of court intrigue kind of things within this book. A lot of being in Cordelia's head, a lot of, not a lot of things that I would consider to be super sci-fi. Barrayar feels a lot like Earth to me. And again, I haven't read the whole series, and I haven't even read, these 2 books don't even follow the same main character as the rest of the series, but I don't think I like the way that Bujold writes characters. I just find that I cannot connect with any of her characters. They just feel so wooden to me. And maybe that changes in other books. And if that's true and you've read them, please let me know, because I feel like a monster not liking this series, but I have read 2, and that's probably it for me, unless somebody really convinces me that I need to try one of the Miles books. So I'm gonna show you my ratings over here. This was the hardest one for me to rate because I wanted to like it, and I just didn't have a good time. Like, the whole time was not a good time, so. Okay, now we're going to talk about the book that I DNF'd, and I did read more than 50% of it, so I will talk about it. I'm not going to do a rating for it because I didn't finish the whole thing, but that book is Station Eternity by Moore Lafferty. I love this cover. I love this cover. So this is a sci-fi mystery, and our main character is living on a space station. There's been first contact. She's one of the first humans to live on this space station with all these aliens. But the deal with her is that she thinks that for some reason murders always happen around her, and she always has to solve them. It's treated in this very kind of like comedic style, sort of, that people always die around her, and then she mysteriously has to solve the murders. And that's kind of a funny setup, and I did enjoy some of the humor. But the problem is, I felt like I literally got to 50% of the book, and I still didn't know what the central mystery of the story really was. And that was a problem for me. And I just thought the pacing was weird. And it's very different from the author's previous book that I read, which is 5 Wakes, which I gave 5 stars to. And that is a locked room space mystery, but it's played much more seriously than this was. And I think it was the tone. I think it was the lighthearted tone combined with first contact and murder, and it just didn't work for me. And I was really sad about it because this is a series that I really, really wanted to love because I love the first book by the author so much, but it was it was okay, I suppose. And maybe the ending would have pulled it out, but it was taking me forever to read, so I called it and said, I'm not going to finish this. Then I read the new book by Amal El-Matar, The River Has Roots. This is a novella that tells the story of two sisters who live near a river that has an entryway into Fairy. One of the sisters is in love with someone from Fairy, with one of the Fae, and the sisters are very close. They sing together every night. There's a lot of mysticism and fairy tale, and it's a really hard book to explain. And I really don't feel like I can try too hard because the book is only 120 pages long. And not only does it have that short page length, but it also has illustrations that are eating up some of those pages. So it's actually shorter than that. I read it in about 2 hours, but I had a good time with it. I enjoyed it. It was, of course, beautifully written. As anything by this author is going to be beautifully written. She was also one of the authors of How to Lose the Time War, which is a book I really love. And this has a similar style to the prose. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the story. I liked the fairy tale elements of the story. I thought that it just felt like reading a fairy tale to me. And I would have enjoyed, I think if it were longer, I would have given it a little bit of a higher rating because I think it was a little bit short for me to get really invested in the characters. But if you're looking to get a taste of this author's writing, then I think this is a decent one to start with. Be aware that I was confused for the first 20 pages until I figured out what was going on with the magic system. So just be aware it might take you a little bit to get into the style, and that the prose is extremely purple, not in a bad way. It just is. It's how she writes. But I enjoyed it. I had a good time. And I look forward to reading something longer by this author. I really hope she writes a full-length novel. And we are to my last 2 books that I read in the month of March. And I did pick up a book. So this was my physical TBR jar draw. If you don't know, I have a jar that is full of all of my unread physical books back here. I pull one every month. And this was the one I pulled this month. It was also a book I didn't finish on my TBR in February. And that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And I'm going to have to give, I think, what's probably going to be a little bit of an unpopular opinion about this book and tell you all that I did not have a good time with this book. And I am not going to be continuing the series, and I'm going to try to explain to you why. We follow a girl named Rin. Rin is an orphan who has been raised by abusive foster parents, who manages to study so hard that she's able to get into the top military academy in this world. It has a very kind of, I would say, I don't want to say Harry Potter, but I do a little bit want to say Harry Potter at the beginning, except she's going to a military academy, not Hogwarts. And she gets there, she arrives at this place, they're going to class, they're doing all the class things, they're moving through the ranks. And I would say maybe like 40% of the way through the book takes a really hard turn. I don't want to do spoilers, so I'm not going to do spoilers, but the book takes a tonal shift that was so abrupt it didn't really work for me. And I also struggled because I felt that Rin herself was one of the most unlikable protagonists that I have read in a really long time. I don't need to like everybody in my book, but she was just the worst. She was the worst. And I know she's supposed to be morally gray, but there was no one in the book who I cared about and I rooted for. And it was so dark. And you should be aware before you read this book that there is a chapter that is so gory, and it is based on a real life battle that you would want to be prepared to go into that, because I knew it was coming, so I was kind of expecting it, but man, it was a lot. And I don't know, I didn't care for the magic system in the world. I didn't like the ending of the book. I just had a bad time. I read the whole thing, but I didn't have a good time. And I've been trying to kind of articulate what would have made the book work better for me. And I feel like probably what would have made it work better for me would have been if this had been 2 books. It was just, we had spent so little time in the school world that then having this tonal shift completely just didn't work for me. It felt rushed, and it feels, I mean, I know she was very young when she wrote it. It feels a little bit younger from her other books. And I, by the way, do really like R.F. Kuang. Babel is one of my favorite books of all time. I'm not saying I don't like her, but I did not like this. I just did not care for it, and I am disappointed. But I would, I'm always going to want to be honest on my channel and tell you guys what I really think about things. And I really did not care for this. It doesn't mean I wouldn't recommend it, but I would be aware and I would look up those trigger warnings and I would know what I was getting into before I started it. I did know all of those things, but I still was a little bit taken aback by it. So not a recommendation for me, not a good rating for me, but here we are. And finally, the last book that I read this month was Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. This is another novella. It is the start of a It is the start of a sci-fi mystery series where we have a kind of middle-aged female character who is a ship's detective on what I'm going to describe as a generation ship, but it's not so much a generation ship because when your body wears out on this very long space journey, they just make you a new one and you get put into that. So your mind gets implanted into that. And so the idea is that she wakes up in the wrong body, finds that there has been a murder and that there has been some tampering with the library of minds. And that's kind of where we are. It also feels like it's the 1920s. Like it just straight up feels like it's the 1920s on this ship. I don't know how to explain that, but I would say that if you do like that kind of mystery, like if you're an Agatha Christie person, you need to read this book. I thought it was fantastic. I wanted it to be longer. It's only about 110 pages long. That's not really enough for like a fully fledged mystery for my taste, but I adored it and I will be reading the second book in the series whenever that comes out, and that is definitely a recommendation for me. Okay, so now I am gonna head over to my desk over here and we are going to decide what the best book I read this month was using my bracket that I made, and then I'll be back. Okay, friends, here we are. And as you can see, I have set up the brackets here at the beginning and over here, the ones that got, I guess, buys, sports language, don't know. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go through and we are gonna decide which one is gonna move on in each category. Okay, so in this first one up here in the corner, I Cheerfully Refuse versus When the Moon Hits Your Eye. There is no question that it's going to be I Cheerfully Refuse. So let's add that to the bracket. And then between An Absolutely Remarkable Thing and The Nickel Boys, it's definitely going to be The Nickel Boys. Those are both 4 stars for me, but I feel like The Nickel Boys is one that's going to stick with me a lot more than The Hank Green. Put that right in here. And then we have The Keeper of Lonely Spirits versus Fable at the End of the World, and it's obviously going to be The Keeper of Lonely Spirits, which I loved much more than the one that I didn't really like at all. Unfortunately, still sad. And then same thing here, Cordelia's Honor versus the Ragpicker King. It's obviously going to be the Ragpicker King. So let us put that here and go on to make our final 4. So Here's, I think, where it starts getting a little bit harder. So we've got I Cheerfully Refuse versus The River Has Roots. And I loved The River Has Roots, but I Cheerfully Refuse just really stuck with me. So I think it's going to have to be I Cheerfully Refuse. And then for this one, The Nickel Boys versus Station Eternity. And that's going to be The Nickel Boys. The Keeper of Lonely Spirits versus The Poppy War is going to be The Keeper of Lonely Spirits. I think I got lucky that all of my 5 stars were not in the same brackets. And then we have Murder by Memory or The Ragpicker King. And that one is a harder one for me because I loved both of these, but I really did love this little mystery story. But I think I have to go with The Ragpicker King because it made me cry. It's my game. I get to make the rules. Let's take one of these. Okay, so now we're going to get to our final matchup, and it's going to be 2 great books, both literary fiction, I would say. But I think that I Cheerfully Refuse is the one that has stuck with me for longer. And then here we have The Keeper of Lonely Spirits, which was 5 stars, versus The Ragpicker King, which was also 5 stars. But again, this one broke my heart and put me back together. So it's going to be The Keeper of Lonely Spirits. Okay, so we've got a final battle here between what I think are realistically my 2 favorite books that I read this month, and I loved both of them, and it's so hard to decide which one I liked more. Well, I Cheerfully Refuse was beautiful and devastating and made me think about a lot of topics. It made me scared sometimes about the future, whereas The Keeper of Lonely Spirits made me feel optimistic and hopeful about the future. And there's no wrong answer, but I think that where I am right now with my reading is, as much as I love this and I appreciated this, this one made me feel that everything was going to be all right. And that is what I need in my life. And so that is going to be our champion for the month. So, best book of March 2025, the winner of Book Madness is The Keeper of Lonely Spirits by E.M. Anderson. And I know I already said it, but if you have not read this book, you need to go read this book because it was fantastic. Okay, guys, and there you have it. All the books that I read in the month of March. I had a great reading month. I hope you all had a great time watching this. I hope you enjoyed my bracket nonsense because I worked very hard on that. Please leave me a comment. Let me know the best book that you read in March because I am always looking for new recommendations. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.